Welcome back to 90 Seconds Plus. Today in the hot seat we've got Deputy Mayor Tom Campbell while Nobby takes a month's leave of absence.
So, Nobby will be away for a month.
Yep.
And when Nobby goes, I've stepped into his role, and it's like stepping into a whirlwind, right?
Yeah.
Nobby works so hard, right? So his diary's transferred to mine, and suddenly it's 12 hours a day, right? So he's only been gone 3 days, I'm knackered. How he manages to do it for month after month, year after year, but he's, one of Nobby's things he's not so good at is delegating work. He wants to do everything himself. And for that reason, he's working 12-hour days and he's working at the weekends. And, hopefully when he comes back, we can try to take some of that load off him. But God, he works hard.
From yourself down the chain, you know what I mean? So across council.
Yeah.
So we need to utilise that more.
Well, look, absolutely, because last 2 nights, I've had evening engagements that Nobby would normally have.
Yeah.
So I look at them and I think, God, if you're doing that every day, how do you manage that? And then you look at them and you think, well, look, if it's a meeting with educators, why not get Trish Boyle to do it?
Totally.
If it's a meeting with younger people or about younger things, get Steve to do it, get Alex to do it. If it's a meeting about economic development, he likes to, so maybe he wants to do those things. But if he's not available, get me to do it, or get Grant to do it. So there's plenty of options. And I think when he comes back, we've really got to persuade him that that's the best way to go. Because, I don't care how young or fit you are, you work 12-hour days, 7 days a week. Does it take too long before you're out on your feet? And I really think that's where Nobby was.
Right, so the next topic to move on to would be the juggling or rejuggling of the committees and the chairs, etc. So let's just touch on that.
So at the beginning of the triennium, it's the mayor's job to appoint the chairs, to decide how the committees will be split and to appoint the chairs. So Nobby did that, but when he did that, he said that halfway through the triennium, 18 months into it, he would have another look at it, and it might be we change the committees, it might be we change the chairs. So, he and I have been talking about this ever since he came back, actually, from his last sick leave. And the reason that the committees changed the way they did is because, we had infrastructure, we had projects, we had finance, right? Now, beyond the museum, nearly all of the larger projects are actually in the infrastructure area. So it's crazy having two committees. They would just be tripping all over each other. So really it had to be one or the other. So Nobby decided that we would have projects and infrastructure as a single committee. And then you're left, is that going to be led by Grant or by Rangi or by somebody else? And Grant won out. So, and the other thing I would say is that, the other committee, which Leslie will lead, Leslie has been probably, for me, the star performer of this triennium. If ever anybody deserved to get promoted, it was Leslie.
I've got to say, just there, I've noticed that definitely this term, Leslie and Darren Ludlow have been on fire. They've really been, I think, a lot more energised and they're just loving, I think, getting stuff done. You know what I mean? Rather than ongoing fighting, even though there's a bit of a hiccup at the moment. But I mean, those two really, I've noticed, stand out this term.
Absolutely, and it's not only what happens in the chamber, Mike. It's the amount of hours that they put in other stuff outside, working with the community, leading particular initiatives. And you're right, both Leslie, and Darren have been exceptional in what they've done. So Leslie thoroughly deserved it. Now, I know that Rangi has said that he feels disappointed. Well, that's life, isn't it? I mean, I always wanted to be play striker for the football team. They made me left back, right? And I was disappointed with that. But that's just life, and you've just got to swallow that.
That's fair enough. Now we touch on rates. Now again, rates were going to be in the mid or early 20s, but they've got it down, or me and Nobby's got it down, and the team have got it down to down to 9 point something, isn't it?
So look, we've been working on rates for over a year, probably closer to 18 months. Nobby was determined, because his background, he's always been very strong in trying to keep rates down. So Nobby was determined that we would have a single figure rate increase, in other words, less than 10%. And a lot of Nobby's work in the last year has been to try to get that down. He's been working, of course, the whole council has, working with officers and with Michael Day, the chief executive, to try to get it down. We've got it down to about 9.8. Now that's still higher than anybody wants, but it's an awful lot lower than, what we see around about the country. And I think we probably have trimmed all of the fat now. Cut any more, we're into muscle, and we don't want to do that. So, Nobby takes an awful lot of credit. I got to say that if anybody had led that work, other than Nobby, and I include myself in this, if anybody else had led that work, we'd have ended up with 15 or something like that. So we're ended up with 9.8, and again, Nobby deserves a lot of personal credit for that.
He's always a stickler for trying to keep the rates down because you got to feel for a lot of, particularly the elderly and that who are on fixed income, particularly, you know what I mean? Whereas, and even, everyone's feeling it, I guess, but certainly those ones that are on that fixed income.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And every time, Nobby and I obviously expect talk regularly, and every time we do, Nobby always talks about things like homelessness and mental health. These are the things, you don't really hear about them too much in the media. You don't hear about that stuff, but, that's what Nobby always talks about. And, it's a bit of passion of mine, it's a bit of passion of Nobby's, and it's actually a bit of passion of Leslie Soper, which again is one of the reasons why she's, I think, come to the fore and been very much part of that group that's been trying to drive that as hard as we can. So, again, Nobby, people see a little bit of him, but there's a huge tip of the iceberg. There's a huge iceberg underneath the water that people never hear about.
No, you don't. And I have to say, the mainstream media, the text, the way they've done it, it's it's terrible gaslighting the way they keep saying over and over, regurgitating the various allegations or story. But I mean, the thing is, our city's going gangbusters at the moment. Where our region is, we've got TY confirmed for 20 years. We've got the Langlands Hotel. We've got Invercargill Central. We've got the HWR Tower, and now we've got late next year? We've got the Distinction Hotel coming online. So, hello,
Nobby. I took over Nobby's meeting yesterday with the Chinese ambassador, who came here and spent an hour with us. Now, to some extent, these things are ceremonial. There is a hail well met, and you little gift to each other, which. But we spent a pretty solid hour talking about, economic development, where we would like to take Southland, how China might be able to help with that, and a very positive discussion, actually. So we talked about aquaculture, and we talked about renewable energy, we talked about green hydrogen, we talked about SIT and how we can get more Chinese students into that. We talked about how we can get tourists in here. And the other thing that surprised me a little bit, we talked about how we can build more housing. How do the Chinese build the housing so, and we cannot, and we talked a bit about that. So it was really positive. Now, you never know whether anything comes of that. But I think the main point I want to make about that is there is nothing in the mainstream media about that, Mike. No. We've got headlines today, which is a mixture of Rangi Pottinger and Maxwell Clark. Nothing about the Chinese ambassador. Now, what's more important actually for Southland? It's not difficult. The other two ones will be, wrapping fish and chips within a couple of days. The Chinese ambassador one might be a story that runs for decades. So we seem to look for bad news stories rather than the really good stuff that's actually happening at the moment. Because Southland's, very, very optimistic. TY's helped a lot with that. But, there's other things happening as well. Some of the things that you mentioned, where I think the mood in the city is very positive, and yet we keep dragging it down. And the other thing I'm going to say is, one of the reasons why I always agree to speak to you whenever you ask if I want to do this, is because I get to say whatever I want, and I get to finish the sentences, right? So one of the problems with mainstream media, and particularly print media, is that you get halfway through the sentence, and that's the quotation marks end, right? So sometimes the totality of what you're trying to say just gets lost.
Completely changes the messaging.
And I don't mean that they do that intentionally, but if you only get half the they've only got so many lines that they can, right? So it ends up, it changes the messages. Whereas, what's on Invers, I pretty much say what I want, and I know that you'll play the whole thing.
Exactly.
You want to edit it. So that's why I always agree to do this.
Thanks for that, Tom. That's our 90 Seconds Plus with Deputy Mayor Tom Campbell. And don't forget, it's Matariki this weekend. Kicks off 4 p.m. at the ILT Stadium tomorrow, Friday. See you there.